How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk. You might not know this, but before I record an episode, I like to break a sweat. And I do that using the Chopfit. Over the course of the past year, the Chopfit has allowed me to lose weight, tone up my body, and feel even more amazing about myself. A feeling that you should all feel about yourselves as well. If you use this code, SpearChop10, you get $10 off your order. Once again, use code SpearChop10 and $10 off your Chopfit order. It'll change your life. Thank you. How's it going, everyone? John here, the host of Spear Talk, and today we are welcoming Dan Palacios into the show. Dan is, if you're on social media, specifically Instagram, follow Live Kinetically, and hopefully this episode we can kind of figure out what kinetic living is and all this stuff here. But Dan is I would consider a fitness guru, and I myself am into fitness, but I tend to get lost with people that are pushing different workouts or stuff that I don't really apply to or kind of figure out mentally. But someone like Dan does all this stuff with amazing exercises, anything from a chair to a sandbag, which is why I kind of relate to his training and fitness. And so hopefully Dan can kind of talk about that today.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me today, brother. I'm really excited to be here and give you the rundown on what I do as far as living kinetically and where that whole thing came from. But yeah, it's an interesting world, the what I call the Instasphere.
I love
and all
that.
that's out there, and being able to sort of separate the wheat from the chaff. Not that not that there's too much bad stuff out there. I think you got to key in on what is good and useful, and some people I think intend to do good with the workouts they're putting together and programming they're putting together, but a lot of people are just trying to make money, and hey, look, people got to make money, right?
No,
So
I totally get that. Now, how did
there too, right?
now growing up, were you the athletic type, or what point did you kind of figure out that working out and fitness is great, but there's something more to it than just slamming the weights in the gym?
Yeah, I was an athlete from the time I was little. I was born and raised into it. Most of my family were athletes of various kinds. Pretty much everyone in my family played some kind of sport at some point or another. And really early on, actually, I started training with my dad, really training with my dad when I was probably about like 8 or 9 years old. And I actually started playing hockey before in South Florida, no less. I played roller hockey and a bit of ice hockey. That was the year the Panthers went to the Stanley Cup Challenge. So I was lit up. I have four older sisters. So 3 by blood and 1 stepsister. So I had no real sort of physical aggression outlets as the youngest boy in a family of 4 or 5. With older sisters, I couldn't put that aggression anywhere really. So it was contact sports that really did it for me. So I could go around and hit people, and they said, you have basically license to kill, right? So that was the fun thing for me. So it went from hockey to pretty much football. And once I found football, that was it. I mean, all I wanted to do was play football. So I played football really into my college years, Division I and Division II levels. And along the way, it was really high school where I trained with a coach named Pete Bomarito, a guy who's still down here. He does amazing work. And it was his style of training that really turned me on to the idea my junior year of high school that I think this is something I would want to do. So sports science or exercise sciences or sports health was kind of a realm that I was already thinking about as a high school student, even playing football. And I was just one of those guys who kind of always caught myself doing fun, funky, different stuff in the gym anyway. Everyone else be doing their workouts. I'd already be done, and I'd be over there doing like handstand push-ups against the wall and doing that kind of stuff. So that was really where that passion for training started. And I did see some of that distinction between good coaching and not so great coaching, classic high school football coach type mentality of here's your exercises, get to it, and I see a lot of stuff in the gym and I'm like, I'm not going to do that because I don't feel comfortable doing it, and no one's coaching it. So
it's super weird because I was a D3 athlete, cross country, lacrosse, and I felt, especially lacrosse, the running just put me out there, put a piece of meat in front of me. I'm going for days. I love it. But it felt like there's a system in place, at least it was back when I was in college in 2004, 2008, where athletes and coaches, and not to discredit the coaches themselves, because I think they're all great. They're all great men and women. But their mindset was, okay, you need to do 10 squat or hand cleans. You have to do 10 squats. You have to bench press this amount of weight. I would I put the time in the gym to do it, or what I had to do, of course, I'm all for it. But it got me thinking. It's like, I don't know if this is just, are they making us do this because it's been passed down, and they're this mindset, this caveman mentality of, you have to do these hand cleans. Like, this isn't the NFL combines, and it's like, I don't know. Is it easier just to do a hand clean as opposed to do something else, which I want to talk about with you? All the stuff you do, that all the stuff that's you do is the same. You get the same workout, the same reaction to your body as you would slinging a sandbag as opposed to doing a hand clean. And that mentality kind of discouraged me from the gym. So is there something to that?
Yeah, what the way I see it, from the sort of biomechanical perspective, right, is you start to look at the human body from these primal movement patterns, and this is what I explain to a lot of people who are just starting out, who just really don't understand the validity of what understanding movement brings to your body, not just from a physical perspective, but from an intellectual perspective as well, because it starts to reframe the way you approach your daily life. Life is a sport. And whether we like it or not, or believe it or not, we're all going to squat, lunge, hinge, twist, walk, run, sprint, push and pull on a daily basis. So if you break fitness and strength conditioning down into those terms, it really does simplify it down to, all those different little things that we learn in strength conditioning, which is flexion, extension, internal rotation, external rotation, all the different planes. All of that stuff is what's happening when you move with primal movement patterns. So yes, hang cleans definitely have validity in
Right.
translating over to any sport, right? You have the explosive hip extension, that full body movement that's teaching you to take a load and move it quickly in a direction. But that being said, it was really the non-traditional lifting and stuff like WEC method and the Kabuki strength guys, who turned me on to this idea that there were just different ways to approach these things. And there was a better, deeper understanding to have of the relationship between these primal movement patterns and functionality and specificity to whatever given activity you're applying it to. Does it really make a lot of sense to use the little space you have and time you have for training for lacrosse players to be doing hang cleans left and right,
Right.
or snatches, whatever it is.
Right.
Are there areas in that programming where that could be better served, that time, I mean? So that was kind of really where that started for me. That was about 6 or 7 years ago now, when I first found it was the WEC method RMT club, actually. And if you know anything about the WEC method guys and what they do, it's a lot of rotational movement and functional naturalized movement through rotation, and understanding how to apply rotation in a linear fashion as well as lateral. That's transverse, moving from one direction to the other and redirecting your weight or the momentum of whatever object you're manipulating, whether that's a club, whether that's a baseball bat, a tennis racket, or another human.
Right.
Right. And so that it was that RMT club experience that really started pushing me toward this idea that maybe we just need to reframe in traditional strength conditioning the way we look at specificity of movement and how to apply it to the given sport and the given task. The tough part that strength conditioning coaches always face, and I've been there, I've trained 50, 60 people at a time in a weight room. You got to you got to try to fit the bill for the beast that you're working with, right? So you got a team of 60, 70 guys with several different positions who all have different needs. You're trying to build the program that fits the needs of the sort of general population of that group. So that I totally get, which is actually why I prefer to work in the small group or individual environment, just because I have a hard time personally as a strength coach, sort of giving up the ghost on being able to have that specific need met to that person and getting them to connect on a very, very personal level and an impactful way with whatever it is we're doing with that person. So they can really go, wow, I felt the difference on that, as opposed to here's these 10 exercises for these 60 people, everyone get to it and go and see if you can figure it out. Right.
Right.
That's why I ended up training with a strength coach, one-on-one as a high school athlete. And that's a lot of the reason I prefer to train that way these days. And it was the tools to me that really started to make the difference, because you get better feedback with certain tools. Certain people just flat out can't lift a barbell for a number of reasons. You have adaptive athletes, you have, or they can't lift it the way that it's being coached or programmed in, right? So you have to adapt, you have to respond, and you have to find creative ways to meet that need and help that person become more functional. So, stuff like the RMT clubs and the Bosu balls and all the different hammers and all those different tools that are out there, they're just that. They're just tools. It's how you apply them and what it is you're going to do to help that person connect with that tool so that it takes them to the next step in their training,
Right.
because in the end, all the primal movement patterns are still there, right? Physics hasn't changed.
Has not changed.
It's the tool itself, the design of it, the build of it, the length of it, the weight of it. That's going to change the way you apply those physics. And I think you'll find that if you have a big enough toolbox and you know how to use all those tools in that toolbox, that you'll have a really, really intriguing and fun time training. And it really does totally change your perspective on sort of generalized programming versus that very personalized approach. Like I said, the reason I have 6 different kinds of dumbbells in my outdoor facility is because some people like this dumbbell better than they like that dumbbell. I'm not going to change their opinion on that outside of just coaching them through a few different things and different ways to use it. But if for one reason or another that person refuses to work out with that particular object, I've got plenty of other ways of skinning that cat. So the most important thing is getting them to connect with the movements and see how they actually apply to what they do on a daily basis. Taking inventory of your daily life and sort of breaking it down into not just your behaviors, but also your actual activities and looking at them from a biomechanical perspective. Well, how do you sleep? How does your body feel when you wake up from that sleep? What position is your body in? Did you have restful sleep, or were you just tossing and turning all night? That's why we have all these little Fitbits that monitor your sleep and all this different stuff now, right? Is we're trying to build in these automated coaching systems to tell us those things. But the fact is, we can do that, right? Yep. We can connect with those things and start to pay better attention. Do you have to go up and down stairs all day? What does your morning routine look like when you're preparing your food? Is all your stuff up high and you have to always reach up here, or is all your stuff down low and you have to reach down there? Are there better ways to organize your life so that it is better suited to improving your mechanics and coding your system? Because literally every step is a rep. Every movement is a rep. And your body is essentially the sum total of all the different stuff you do physically on a daily basis.
Right. It's fascinating how you put that way. I guess I never realized that every step you take is actually a limited or unlimited amount of reps you're going to do that day, because you don't know what you're going to do outside of what you're supposed to do, whether it's in the gym or going to work. Very fascinating.
Right. Yeah. And think about it, right? Think about the average person, I guess pre-COVID, what did you do? You get up, you walk to the car, you do your routine, you walk to the car, you get in the car, you drive however long it's going to take you to get to your office. For the most part, you get into your office, you sit in your office for 8 to 12 hours, you get back in your car, you drive home, and at some point or another, you're probably going to go to sleep. And that's, not even including some kind of physical training or other physical activity you might add in there. But I would say that the larger portion of the population probably doesn't train in a very specific way. And they'll tend to look at whatever, the biggest, most fit guy or, the best looking girl is going to be doing on their Instagram workouts or whatever it is, wherever they got their programs from. But that might not be specified to the activities that person is partaking in. And that to me is the most important thing for every individual person to do, is do that movement inventory and go, okay, what are all these things that I'm already doing and building more dysfunction on? And what could I be doing from a specific training perspective to counteract that? Well, we know that generally most people are going to slouch with their shoulders forward, their spine rounded. The pressure from sitting is putting a ton of pressure on their low back and their hips. Their rib cage is now closing down, which is putting pressure on their organs, all that different stuff. Very generally speaking, you can look at most humans and go, yeah, that's a lot of what's going on,
Right.
and, all the different pressure that builds up. So when we program from a general perspective, a lot of times what we're doing is programming to open up, to create extension in the system, right? And to put the body in a more biomechanically open place. And that begins to loosen up certain structures and put certain bones in better positions. The shoulder, for instance, when it's rounded here and all these tissues here are tight, the back ones are weak. We have to spend time strengthening the back, loosening the front, so that humeral head has room to move around inside that ball and socket joint. Otherwise, it's just rubbing, right? And then people going, unknowingly, right? I'm just going to do 1,000 overhead presses. It's not that overhead presses are inherently bad, but for that person, this is not a great position. Just putting on my shirt hurts. Well, now you're trying to throw 135 pounds up over your head. Let's maybe reconfigure things for a little bit and see what we have to do to desensitize your tissues to that movement and why that's occurring. Where is the dysfunction really coming from? A lot of it has to do with that daily movement inventory. You're doing so much more of this than you are of this. And that's just what it boils down to for that given person. So that is sort of a general overview of what we tend to see a lot of from a postural perspective. But then just from a systemic perspective, there's your central nervous system. And we can't ignore that, right?
Right.
Your body is constantly receiving stimulus. It's just all the time, whether it's someone touching you, someone saying something to you, you seeing something, someone cutting you off in traffic, you smell something bad versus you smell something good. Those are all those different sensory inputs that this computer is taking in and logging in all the time. So it's responding to that, for better or for worse. And I think that with all the added stressors that we now have in the world and so much exposure to so much information all the time, that people have really gotten to a place where it's hard to manage all that information. And we've gotten very used to functioning in this quote unquote stagnant state of fight or flight. And that's not a great place to be in, because the adrenaline levels are way up, cortisol levels are way up, and essentially biomechanically, fight or flight mode is by definition a sort of flexor response, right? We're going to brace for impact, or we're going to brace down and then cut and run. So a lot of what we try to do now from a central nervous system perspective is make sure that's in place first, and have sensible ways of managing all that sensory input, and give that person the necessary anchors and tools and techniques to manage that fight or flight mode. Realize when they're even in it. Was this an emotional trigger of some kind? That now, why does my shoulder hurt? Because you're angry and you're in an argument, and now everything's stiffening up and you're getting tighter and tighter from it. Or are you repeatedly doing the same motion that's causing that shoulder to hurt more? Your body doesn't know the difference. Stress is stress. So when it's repeatedly experiencing negative stress, it does start to get to a place where it has no idea how to cope. So we're just going to lock everything up and shut it all down. Blood vessels start to close, tissues get tight and dry and dehydrated. Most people don't drink enough water, right? So, this is where the fitness gurus have gotten to that place of, here's just these basic, simple things you can do. Drink more water, eat a little bit better balanced foods, breathe more often, right? And it's distilled down to that, but really the root of it is we're managing stress, and we're giving our body better ways to do that by training it to handle that, right? That's the definition of simulated stress training for my military and law enforcement, guys and girls who are out there, is we're intentionally building that into the program to say, this isn't just for the sake of beating you up or punishing you through training. That's not the intent of the training. The training is intended to purposely stress you out so that you're physically, biomechanically, and metabolically taxed in such a way that it's hard to function mentally, right? But when that's happening, I need you to be able to process all of that information despite the lack of glycogen running through your system, and your blood sugar's dropping now, and your vision's a little hazy right now, or you're breathing so hard all you're worried about is just getting air into your lungs, right? But at the same time, you're currently worried about protecting yourself from this individual or protecting that individual from themselves,
which is why, like, I'm kind of blown away by this, because you and I kind of talked off the record before. With my background in security, a lot of times the fitness I do, especially now, is it's predicated on the idea of what actions am I going to do in the event I have to do my job, if that makes sense. So a lot of lunges, a lot of my stuff, if I have to react, is very quick, herky jerky, jumping over an obstacle, whether it's a barricade or blocking a 200-pound guy that's twice as big as me coming at me, who's 400 pounds, and all the stuff I got to do with a client, or if I'm carrying luggage from the bus with a client, it's something like so. It kind of makes me wonder, which is why I kind of fell in love with your page, is that everything you do and everything you just said, it's all life-based training. And I love the fact that I can wrap my head around that. If I'm going to work out and still get the workout I would from a traditional gym, I could do it more geared towards what I'm going to have to end up doing in my life, in my career. And I find great value in that.
Oh yeah. No, for sure. That's and that's not to say that you can't train hard, right?
Correct. 100%.
Know when to train hard and know when to back off and decrease the stimulus, but maybe just alter the stimulus to something that's going to be more beneficial for you in that moment, intuitively knowing where your body's at for that given day.
Right.
What you've been doing the last few days. Have you been eating right? Have you been doing taking care of it? And why further punish your system by continuing to burn the motor? That's like, knowing that you just raced a high performance car over the weekend, and then, I'm not going to bother refueling it. I'm not going to bother putting any new, tires on it, or getting the chassis adjusted or anything like that. Now we're just going to go out and run it again. Why does that make any sense?
It doesn't, right?
You would do the tune up, you'd get the thing, ready to go. Same thing with your body, right? So if you just had a really high stress several days, then I really think that a lot of people would do better to get out of that mindset of more is better, pain is weakness leaving the body, all that kind of stuff. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that from a mental perspective,
right?
Of building mental resilience. But I think a lot of people would find their training is far more effective when they construct it in such a way that they're putting themselves more continually and more repetitively in a place of success, right? What can I be successful with today in my training that's gonna continue to build momentum in the right direction, even though it's not going to be of the same level of intensity from a weight perspective. It could be of the same level of intensity from a contraction perspective, right? I'm going to work more isometrics today, or light, fast rotational movements, as opposed to heavy, static, linear pulls and pushes and squats and all that type of stuff. So there are far more ways to stimulate the system than just working with a barbell or a dumbbell and just moving for repetitions, for the sake of loading up pounds on the system. The body is physically capable of contracting from a central nervous system perspective and from a muscular perspective as hard as it would ever need to. Say your maximum deadlift is a 500-pound deadlift, right? That's if we absolutely prepared you and you could only lift the best you could, it was 500 pounds, right? Well, to be quite frank, you don't need that barbell to contract that hard, right?
Oh, interesting. Right.
You're fully equipped, right? It's there to give you the stimulus, to give you the feedback, the weight to pull against, to apply that kind of force. But you're physically capable of contracting and isometrically squeezing with such pressure that central nervous system will engage. So if your body's tired and beat up and sore from the last 3 days of, of romping around with the the band over there, maybe it would be better to do some isometric and high intensity contraction work, as opposed to just burning more fuel,
Right.
and focusing more on time under tension, slower intentional movements for that period of time, until such a time comes you can refuel your system. And 2-3 days later, when your body is back in action, suddenly you realize, man, like, I feel a lot better from that central nervous system driven workout. And now I can move that weight, and now I can work that resistance. And dang, I worked it. I actually lifted more than I thought I was even going to be able to.
Right.
It's not about burning the engine and burning the system all the time. There's a time and a place to condition. I'm not saying don't condition.
No, it's funny because one of the acts I worked do security for is Shinedown, and the singer Brett, he'll part the crowd down the middle, jump down from the stage, and we'll jump over the barricade. Sometimes with some of these big German festivals, there's 3 or 4 barricades, different height, different whatever. But if I'm in an arena, they're headlining, before everything gets set up, I have to visually, mentally do it myself when there's no one in the crowd. Make sure the barricade, like the height, because there was this one time where I did it where, like, I'm young, like, I'm not going to stretch. Like, what kind of, I can jump over 4 feet with my hands. Well, I don't know if I twerk something in my back or my abdominal, but I'm like, man, I gotta practice. As stupid as it sounds, I gotta start doing more lunges and more kind of like these side jumps and just more kind of whatever. It's like, again, it's just really cool to talk to you about this, because seeing you do it on Instagram and all this real cool stuff, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's there has to be a progressional mindset with all of it, right? So you look at it, going back to those primal movement patterns. You'd start with body weight movements and just getting your body familiarized with the forward lunge, the backward lunge, the lateral lunge, the two-handed press, the two-handed pull versus the one-handed press, the one-handed pull. But in the end, you can eventually progress those down the line to what is, specific. You're going to have to be climbing over barricades. Climb over stuff, right?
100%.
Stack up some boxes, get your body used to, just climbing over and moving over. I do this with my tactical athletes all the time, helping them to better understand, like, yeah, you know what, you might not be comfortable loading onto that left side, but guess what? Your firearm is on this side. You're not going to be able to have your firearm in your right hand and place it down on the object that you're climbing over, right? So think about that. So yeah, you have to code those and intentionally build those aspects of your real life application into your training, so that your body knows how to respond when the time comes, and it becomes a reactive baseline rather than something you got to think about in the moment, right? You shouldn't have to worry about how it is you're going to climb over this object when you got to go protect your guy, right? You're just going to freaking go. But your body may or may not pay the price for it. So I tend to think that if you're training this way with keeping your central nervous system in a place where it's not creating more binding in the system, and you're not always just training for creating more tension all the time through free weight training or whatever it is, that it will be better prepared when the time comes. Right. That its baseline level of mobility, flexibility, and responsiveness will be there when you need it to be, despite the fact that you've been, kind of just standing around for the last several hours. You've been sitting in a car for 12 hours. Boom. Now that call comes in and you got to go. There's no time for a warm up.
No, there isn't.
There's no time. All right, excuse me, assailant. I'm going to do some stretching now. No, that's not going to happen. You're going to go. And I think there's a really simple way to apply that to your training on a daily basis, and it's finding ways to get your central nervous system from fight or flight mode into that more objective, what we call the parasympathetic state, right? Getting away from sympathetic dominance, which is fight or flight mode, into the parasympathetic state. There's a lot of different techniques that do that. That's breathing techniques. There's a system called RPR by a great coach named Cal Dietz, another coach, JL Holdsworth. They're awesome guys. Definitely go check them out, where it's all central nervous system manipulation through tactile feedback. You've seen stuff that's like tapping and things like that. There's all different nerve points that you can be hitting in a specific way and through specific patterns that help to not only shift you from fight or flight mode, but also better engage certain muscles and create the proper muscle sequencing, right? When you do a
Right.
squat, should only your quads engage? No, your hamstrings, your glutes, your spinal erectors, all those different muscles that have to brace against the weight here or down here are all going to have to engage. So if your central nervous system is just turned off, then you're here, right? Well, not all the right stuff's going to be engaging. So if you can more consistently utilize those types of tools and techniques to put your body there, you're far more aware of it, and not in a paranoid way, not that you're, how am I moving all day? You're just more naturalized. You're
Right.
used to being in these positions, naturally holding yourself upright when you sit up because you've taken movement inventory of your daily life, right?
Right.
You've intentionally built into your daily training, not just that 60 minutes you spend training, but just your daily mental efforts between hours of training and working. You're focusing on, you know what, I'm gonna take 5 minutes, get up from the desk. I'm gonna breathe. I'm gonna do a couple of these, central nervous system manipulations and a few basic stretches to move my spine and get it going in the right directions. That way, there's a sort of suppleness to your tissues, right?
Right.
And they're prepared to boom, contract when they need to or relax when they need to, and apply that force that you built into a circuit. So say a great circuit would look like something like a light relaxed movement, so totally body weight, some kind of like an RDL type movement, reaching forward, balancing on one leg, and just creating mobility and balance in the system, right? Then the next movement might be a traditional, bench press or deadlift or back squat type of movement, followed by something that is compressive or elastic driven, right? That's like the WEC method stuff where you're using
Right.
more rubber bands to create that intense contraction, and then following that with some kind of a fast paced movement that's short burst rather than long duration, right? Because we're not trying to burn the system, we're just trying to get it firing. Well, that's already 4 movements in a quad set, and those 4 movements, that 4 movements you could build into 10 sets if you really wanted to,
Right.
if you're looking for the conditioning factor, or maybe it is a lighter day and you're going to do 3 or 4 sets on that, right? But right there in that, just that built-in little miniature workout right there, you have a lot of really great stuff that's happening biomechanically and systemically that you can get maybe a lot more out of, rather than just than running 20 different exercises at 20 reps each and going as fast and as hard as you can and just burning the hell out of your system when you're already dehydrated, tired, underfed. You know what I
Right.
mean? So that's kind of the mindset behind it. Is it's not to give sort of built-in reasons and excuses to just take it easy. Make sure you're fueling well,
Right.
make sure you're taking care of your body. But under the best of circumstances, you could be eating really well and resting really well and just not feel good that day.
Right.
Um, you know, feel it out and know where your body's at and know how to apply the right movements to what it is you're doing, for your actual training and your actual life, because you can really beat yourself up over just like, man, like I didn't get I
Right.
didn't get those 10 reps that were scheduled on the workout today. Who cares? You'll get them next time. You know
Right.
what I mean? One workout's never going to make the program anyway. So just having a different mindset and framing your training and programming differently, rather than focusing on the results, focus on the outcome. Right? Was
One
it a
of
good
the
outcome?
you had mentioned previously the pandemic, and I think 2020. I think a lot of people had to get creative with their only mental health, physical health, and stuff like that, just to kind of deal with gyms shutting down all the stuff. But I found that I grew my appreciation for fitness. And again, I never liked the traditional gym, Gold's Gym or Planet Fitness. Like, I never got into it. And not to say they don't serve a purpose, which they obviously do, but I've always been like, if I have an empty keg that I do all my workouts with, because I just like it's different with the weight
Yeah.
squats, whatever, battle ropes. But I also love doing the yard work, where it's like putting stones in a wheelbarrow or actually chopping down a tree. Well, about a month into the COVID, I'm like, man, I wish there was a product out there that I could just get into. And I saw you do the Chopfit,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I got 2 of them. I started doing the workouts. I lost 16 pounds because I love the way the app works. I love how dedicated I was to at least doing every 30, 45 minutes a day. Well, I start following your page because obviously I see you doing it. and I see these other products, and I'm like, hold on, like there's something to this. Like this is perfect for my mindset. So I actually had John Spillman, CEO of Chopfit, on the Spear Talk, and obviously I love and endorse the product. But then as I look further down your page, you got sandbags, you got big Thor hammers, you got these things where your balls on a stick, working on your grip, and all this other stuff. And it's like, how fun is it for you to get to try these products and kind of, I mean, this is like, if anyone's seen your Instagram page, uh it's like this mecca of every armband, weight, balance device. It's just, it's super rad, and you must have so much fun every day going out there just planning your workout.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was kind of what I set out to do, and that was when I took on becoming, a trainer all my own. It was really something that I legitimately, like, I literally sat there and prayed and went, God, um, bring to me the stuff that nobody else knows about. I want the secrets, right,
Right.
of fitness. I want those little jewels that no one else is working with or has seen yet. And I really set out. I made it my mission to find sort of every categorically interesting tool that training has to offer. Because I worked with barbells and dumbbells my whole life,
Right.
kettlebells. I did all that stuff in college. I was a college athlete, so um, I wanted my training to be fun. And I
Yes.
wanted to just be the guy that people could turn to and look to and go, "Oh, okay, like I see this different strange kind of cool tool, but I also still see how those foundational aspects of training still apply." Right?
Right.
That if you're swinging the Chopfit around, here's all the movements that you're doing, and here's where all of those movements apply to a football player, a baseball player, a soccer player, a tennis player, a security officer, a
Right.
police, military law enforcement. This has application universally, right? You just have to be willing to see it and be open
Right.
to seeing it. And that was something I really set out to do. And by this point now, I've kind of gotten to that place where I feel like I really covered a lot of those different categories of tools that are out there, whether it's bands or hammers or axes or heavy bags, all that different type of stuff. It really did become this sort of anti-system of training that was like, you know, look, as long as I'm covering my primal movement patterns for the day,
Right.
I know I'm going to feel great after this workout, and I know I'm getting results out of it. It's not that I'm against programming. I am, program. If your life
100%. Right.
is in that place and geared towards it, program your workouts. But I enjoy the benefits of still getting better and still seeing improvements, seeing that, I really don't have any particular competitive or physical goals. But I'm seeing strength gains, I'm seeing agility gains. I move better in a lot of ways at an older age than I did when I was a younger athlete. And a lot of it has to do with all this different versatility that has been introduced to my training, whether it's the inertia waves or the aqua training bags or the chop fits or just the breath belt. Um, all those different tools have contributed to this broadly, I mean, vastly larger movement inventory that I now have, right?
Right.
And my daily movement inventory is hugely different than probably most because of that.
Yes.
And I tend to feel that has given me a pretty broad spectrum of capabilities physically that I otherwise wouldn't have developed if all I was ever doing was a lot of linear work in the gym with barbells and just the same old push pull squat lunge and hinges. Now it's much more about learning to manipulate that given tool in all the different ways that it's capable of being manipulated, and challenging my body to do it. I mean,
Right.
that was something I really struggled with at the beginning of all of this. Not COVID, but breaking out on my own and moving away from a facility that I was working for at the time. It was the conventions of strength conditioning in a lot of ways were very limiting. And I didn't love the idea that there were people out there saying stuff like, this is forbidden, that is forbidden, movements are forbidden, certain movements are forbidden for any number of reasons. Um, and it was more like, to me, well, why is it forbidden? for this person, but not that person, right? Why is this
Correct.
person able to do it and they do it ad infinitum, right? But this person is just, it's killing them, right? There had to be a more specific answer to why that was happening. And it really, a lot of that for me came from actually parkour and free running.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was a discipline that I picked up for fun. I didn't want to become the age old washed up football player who gets fat and lazy and just stops working out but keeps eating kind of thing. So I said, I'm gonna get into those movement disciplines that I never got to get into as a kid because I was playing football and I prioritized that. And frankly, just didn't want to get hurt doing like anything else. I didn't want to take away from my football time. So
Right.
I took that on as a discipline with a gym down here called Miami Free Running and Parkour. And a lot of those guys actually ended up being Ninja Warrior guys. And that led to the whole world of Ninja Warrior for me. And that was tons of fun because now I learned an entirely different way of moving because a lot of it was moving with my hands and climbing. And I was a pretty heavy guy. So, I was, walking around at 190 and able to lift some pretty big weights and move athletically
Right.
and really powerfully. But then I see all these guys flying around off 20-foot walls and doing all this different stuff, and I felt like I was a freaking brick. You know what I mean? Yeah, I felt like I moved like an elephant compared to these guys, and there was just such fluidity and grace and explosiveness to what they were doing. And I started to really look at the physics of that, and that introduced me to a lot of break dancers and other
Yep.
acrobatic type movement disciplines. And I'm going, when it all came full circle, it was like there's something more here, man. We're missing
Right.
something,
The
right?
American Ninja Warrior is super fascinating because it's one of those shows where if you're with your friends or my cousins, we'll look at it. And it's for me. I've never done it. I've never seen it. And I always, when I see people fall at the first one or look stupid, I'm just like, man, how hard can this be? Well, it must be incredibly hard, right? Because it's just like, I don't think people realize that. Could I do could I hold on a rope or whatever? But am I strong enough to use my grip to go across the board or push my counterweight against glass or do the warp wall? It's like, I don't know. Like it's cool that you've done that because I can only imagine like what's that process like with all these people? Like how is that the filming and stuff behind all that?
Well, it is a crazy process. I mean, I wasn't like a big time competitor or anything. I was on it twice, once as a walk on, once as a casted, quote unquote, casted member. But the training for it for me again was such a totally
Right.
big departure from what I was used to as far as the general strength conditioning mentality of like preparing for traditional sports. A lot of it's climbing, so you're taking on rock climbing now as a discipline, and you look at the
Right.
positions these guys are in, and you're going, this doesn't make sense. The strength coach tells me I'm going to tear my shoulder if I do that, but this guy's flying up a wall that's
Right.
flat and getting his hands into crevices and all these kinds of things, right? So there's that aspect of Ninja Warrior, which is a lot of hand driven locomotion, right? You're climbing with your hands and your legs are suspended, versus the stuff like the quad steps and the balance obstacle or the warp wall, which is full body but leg driven, foot driven
Right.
locomotion, right? And to have that broad profile of skills and just sort of the
Within a
right
minute and a
body
half
type,
too. Like there's a time limit too.
the
Right.
right combination of strength and strength to body weight ratio and athleticism and coordination. To me, it was like the ultimate expression of physical superiority because
Right.
you had to have this massively broad profile of skills to be able to complete this very specific task and a serious level of conditioning to do it. Because let me tell you, when you're talking about like stress load and stimulus, you've gone through this process of trying to actually train for this thing. Somehow or another, you manage to get the call back and get casted, and they give you a run time, right? Everyone's going to show up. We're going to wait. Everyone's going to be running. You have the whole production crew out there. They have, a paid audience to be out there. And literally every time someone runs, they got to reset the cameras. They got to reset the production crew. And it's exhausting. And then you have
Right.
people who are going out there and doing it, after having driven, 8-10 hours to be at that location, and they've
Right.
been camping out all week to do it. Right. So it's this really crazy, cool, interesting world. And there's just so much stimulus around it. You finally get up to that starting block, and the guy in front of you just fell on the first step, so everything's wet, and that. Right.
Right.
And your heart's just already pounding.
Right.
Right. Just like, you're like this, and you haven't done anything yet. Right. But you got all these people watching you, you got cameras on you, if you look like a total moron, it's probably gonna end up on TV. Right. And then you start going, man, and it's just like, it's this really weird, surreal feeling. You're trying to be as careful as possible, but you're also trying to be, quick about this whole thing. And again, they're always trying to throw in new obstacles, right? They're trying to make it as difficult as possible or as new as possible, so that you can't be sitting there kind of calculating what it is you're going to do, even though you've been doing that all night. So the first year that I had done it, I had never trained on a warped wall before. So I actually had no problem with the entire course up to that warped wall. I had dressed up as a Santa Claus. One of my buddies lent me a Santa Claus suit to walk on, and they actually managed to do it, pick me to go on. And I got to that warped wall, and despite my conditioning and all the training that I've done, my legs were just shaking. I could feel them just barely under me at that point. And it was about 3:30 in the morning, by the way. I've been out there since, many hours. So, and yeah, I just couldn't make the warped wall. And that for me was just so frustrating, because it was like, I felt like I'm at least athletic enough to do this, right? It felt like a warped wall was like a kind of a gimme.
How hard could this be? Right.
Yeah. Well, it's 14 feet, but when you don't know how to do it, or you've never done it before, there's physics involved there, right? And then the next year for me, it was the same thing. It was a new obstacle that got me, though, and it was like a what they call a flying pipe slider. So you slide down the pipe, it drops, slides again, drops, and then hits a wall. You have to throw yourself forward and grab the net. And just didn't apply myself enough. The physics of that weren't there for me to like get a full grip on it, and I just slipped off the net and things like that. But it was from taking it back to a training perspective, it was the variability of everything, right? All that stimulus, and looking at the physics of all the different movements. And it's like there's so many things that in traditional strength conditioning for me became pretty restrictive. And it's like, you can't do this, you can't do that, or these are the things you should be doing, and only this to focus on being able to do this lift, right? Well, to be quite honest with you, a lot of those lifts did not help me at all in Ninja Warrior or parkour and free running or those types of things, right? It was learning and developing the necessary skills, right? The specificity of those skills, understanding how to apply the physics and momentum of my body in a very particular way, and how to compress and create force or tension when I needed to, as opposed to constantly being tight. So that's where a lot of those theories started to really like crystallize for me. Once I started working with like the WEC method principles and all those different types of things, it was like this programming could be vastly, vastly different. And we could very easily build these systems into generalized training, where we're doing a better job of coding people for success, and building compressive training, the elastic training, high contraction versus low contraction, fast twitch contraction versus slow twitch contraction, all these types of things. And through full ranges of motion that we used to basically say, like, you can't move that way, or you shouldn't move that way, or you shouldn't be teaching people to do this or that. I tend to think that if we start demonizing certain biomechanical movement patterns that the body is actually designed to do, that we're essentially limiting human capacity. Well, let me tell you, I've seen a break dancer twist his arm around this way and spin on top of it while he's doing it, and not tear his shoulder in half. So that was one of those areas that it just really made a lot more sense to keep my mind open to all the possibilities. And that's a lot of the reason I started finding all these different tools and toys and things like that, was because of really the Ninja Warrior and parkour and free running world. That was just those alternative movement disciplines that I was like, man, there's so much more that the human body is capable of than we're giving it credit for. in the world of strength conditioning, where we start to kind of just fit people into this box of, organizing it so that most anybody can do this, right? But it really moved and delved out into these really interesting territories of all the different tools that we're working with now, and it's become a lot of fun to train again, and to see what the body is capable of. What is it capable of? What can we do with it? How far can we take it? And then being able to apply it to actual clients and see that not just from a physical benefit, but a mental and emotional benefit too. Because I can't tell you how many times, like, getting to work with a lot of these different tools and people, my clients start to see that, okay, this tool is being used by LeBron James, right? An inertia wave was LeBron James was using the inertia wave, and and this guy was using the Banff hammer, and that guy, Von Miller's using the breath belt, all these types of things. For my clients especially, they're going, man,
well,
like,
it works for them.
I'm training like an elite athlete and I feel good. And that's, what a mental boost that is, to see that there's validity to the training alternatively, from what we're used to doing all the time. It's not to say that we're not going to do those things, but we're just going to add these things, and it's going to change the perspective on how we approach it. And it's a lot of fun, man. It really is a lot of fun to see people come up through it.
Well, I wanted to ask you, as a coach or instructor, do you find that, say you have a 20-year tactical guy, whether armed forces, police, or a former athlete that's rehabbing, if they, or are there chances where these people can bring in their previous training / ego? Does that get in the way of them kind of listening to you, and kind of, how do you kind of reprogram someone to be like, hey, your way may have worked for you, but listen to my way? Or like, is it tough to shake kind of like that back baggage when people start training with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly, it's one of those things I've not really had to experience. I tend to think that most of the people who come to me are coming because they're kind of at their wits' end with themselves. And that includes the high level military operators, or veteran law enforcement officers. They're going, man, I did so much years of damage to my body. I just want to feel good, and my take on that tends to be, we can still give you the intensity you're craving, because that's what, your body wants, that physical high of like, that was hard, right? But at the same time, we can start to find better alternative ways to help you move more naturally. And, we can achieve that in a half hour worth of training. So generally, because you can make someone feel good physically, you kind of disarm them mentally and emotionally right out of the gate. And I can honestly say I've not received that many actual objections to any training, which I feel lucky. I've not had to like fight anyone on like, this is a thing you need to do. And I kind of like Tai Chi it, man. If there is, that's part of the reason I have so many tools, is because if for one reason or another a person I can tell that they're getting frustrated with something, we move on. Here's another thing we can do now. You haven't developed the skill and proficiency to understand this well enough yet. What's a different way we can do this movement without making it intellectually frustrating for you? That might be for, firearms or, hand-to-hand combat, right? Well, this technique works for the big guy, but it doesn't work for the little girl, right? Or she's not going to be able to hold that firearm because the handle is just too dang big, right? We need to find a different tool for that person to achieve the same end. And that's a lot of the approach that I take with like training objections of any kind. But generally speaking, when you make people feel good and you give them the right detail-oriented instruction, they can feel it right away. And oh man, you get those aha moments all the time where it's like, wow, that little shift in my foot made my glute fire better. And I didn't know I was even supposed to feel my glute in that moment, but now I do, and I know what that thing feels like. So if you're training properly and you're giving the right instruction, the right cueing, I think people can connect with it right away. And as long as you don't let your own ego get in the way, right? What's best? What do I want for this client versus what they need? that was something I learned early on, is like, don't let what I desire for this person of, high capacity or low capacity to get in the way of what they actually need on that given day. It could be, just sitting there and breathing and doing some mobility work to get them out of fight or flight mode, because they're just too intellectually and emotionally tense that day to get through it. They can't even think straight. They haven't been eating
Right.
well the last few days. They're so frustrated with what just went on with their spouse, or their, kid is doing whatever, and getting them to move this hammer this way or the ropes this way or whatever today is just not going to happen. Well, how can I benefit you right here, right now, and make sure that that you leave here better than I found you? Kind of
Now
idea.
those tactical guys or police guys or military guys that come in, do you trade with them? If normally when I was in law enforcement, the government, I would have to wear a bulletproof vest when you're duty. So a lot of times, uh, I never worked out with the vest on because I wasn't looking at it that way. But if I was a cop now or someone, I would want to trade with, say, my gun belt or my tactical vest with that extra weight, because the minute you do get these real life situations, don't you want to trade to never need it as opposed to need it, not have it. So when those
Right.
guys come in, that must affect too, because doing a battle rope's tough as it is. But if I got a 25-pound gun belt on or a tactical vest, like that changes the whole, not even physical, but the whole mental outlook of that workout.
Oh yeah, I mean, just from a biomechanical perspective, yeah, it does actually change your movement patterns. You're not going to move the same way. You can't
Right.
get that leg up as high when you're wearing polyester pants
No,
and
you can't.
boots, and and then the vest on and the gun belt on. So yeah, I mean, just about every one of my tactical athletes, I make sure that they at least know they need to start doing some movement training and things like that with their gun belt on and with a vest on, or at least get some kind of a weighted vest that has
Right.
that sort of compressive quality to it, and actually get into their uniform and do some training inside of their uniform, because it does alter the way that you move, and it does alter your mindset on what it is you're going to be doing when you move. It's far easier to move in yoga pants and
Yeah.
or athletic pants and athletic shoes than it is in tactical gear. So your mobility is legitimately going to be changed. That's
Right.
like football pads, right? I can't get my arm way the heck up here without the shoulder pads getting here, or turn my head the same way when that helmet's on. So we got to train with that stuff on. We got to know what it
Right.
feels like to get our body into those positions when the time comes. And then, like you said, what does it change the mindset? What's the intent behind this training? I'm much more likely to do something in the gym that's more aesthetics driven, say, if I don't have my tactical gear on. But if I've got my tactical gear on, I'm going to focus a little bit more on what it means to train like a police officer or military personnel, right? Do some of that simulated stress work. I've gone so far as to get a lot of dry fire type
Oh,
training
nice. Yep.
modalities. There's one called the Mantis X with the dry fire mag. It's an integrated magazine that has a little app that tells you, if you're slapping the trigger, if you're anticipating recoil, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And it gives you that sort of feedback based on the little gyroscope in there, as well as the laser system now that goes in there. And it gives us legitimate feedback for someone, say, who's never fired a firearm before or even held one, much less. It removes that intellectual and emotional fear of, oh my God, this thing
A
could
real
like go
weapon.
off and I
Right.
could drop it and it could shoot me, whatever, or just the sound of it is too much for me to handle. We can now integrate that and start to myelinate and create that muscle memory of, here's how you draw it, here's how you place your hand, right? Here's how you line up the sight, get those mechanics set in stone, and start to help them really deconstruct that, so that, again, when the time comes, they know how to do that properly without hurting themselves or somebody else unintentionally, right?
Right.
Not that I'm a firearms instructor, I'm not, but it's actually pretty cost effective because bullets are
Right.
expensive these days. So, being able to build those systems again into your daily work, I recommend that kind of stuff for my tactical athletes all the time. And having a sandbag or the inertia waves or something that's very mobile and what we call deployable is
Right.
critical for that population, because they're going to be on a 12-hour shift. They might not be able to get back to the department, or their department doesn't provide an hour to train on the job.
Right.
So
Well, I throw my Chopfit, my luggage, every hotel room I'm in.
Yeah,
I mean, 30 minutes. Whatever I could do
you're going to get some movement, right? And your body's going to move in ways, right? The same movement of the chop fit swinging up like this is the same as throwing repeated uppercuts and shifting your body from one position to the other. That's that rotational movement that we need to be building into it, right? Or maybe you just need to get your heart rate up. There's plenty of ways to do that with that given tool. So if you really wanted to, you could also add extra security driven intent or sentinel driven intent by also putting some firearms work into there, right?
100%.
Do 2 minutes of chop fit work and then work on your dry fire work, and have the feedback to say, wow, when my heart rate's not up, I have total control over this firearm. When my heart rate is up, I can't even grab the thing. I can barely place my hand in the right spot. Those are definitely areas of red flags for someone who does this as a profession and needs to know how to control their body when it's in a physically taxed state. That's not even talking about all the sort of mental and social and all the other stuff that goes on for police officers and military personnel now. When you're in a life or death situation, everything goes out the window. This is like I just talked about this with Tony Blauer.
I love him.
With Tony, yeah. So, those autonomic systems and those very deep primal fear-driven systems totally take over. Well, Tony figured out ways to weaponize that system, right? And teach people the intent of going, look, we know for a fact that when that fist suddenly comes at you, you're going to do this. So use it. Boom. We're going to now train ourselves on a daily basis to apply that and make it an instant weapon. When that fist comes flying at your face, the first thing you're probably not going to do is go drawing for your gun.
Correct.
Right? You're probably going to try to protect yourself you're first. And then when their person's on top of you, you're now going to start to go, oh, I need to retain my firearm. Right. But by that point, it's too late. Right. So that's kind of the mindset behind it is systematizing your training specific to your goals and your activities, right? Again, what does your daily movement inventory look like, and how can you better train to counteract maybe some of the negative effects of that while also improving on the skills and techniques and tools that you actually need to apply to be successful at what it is you're doing. For tactical athletes, for people like that, it's going to be, hand-to-hand combat driven work. It's going to be a lot of physical mobility. So being able to move from the ground up and down to the ground quickly and efficiently without getting hurt, being able to sprint at a moment's notice and, move explosively without any kind of warm up to go with it. And then, being able to apply what we call necessary force as opposed to excessive force. But the cool thing about training is you'll know what those degrees of excessive force are because you've contracted your body hard enough to use the amount of force required to move something, right? If you train with certain loads at a sort of a lighter load, you can feel what it feels like when you do too much, right? A perfect example is a hang clean, right? If you do too much on a hang clean, what's going to happen? It's going to come way up and come slamming down. That's inefficient, and it makes the movement sloppy, and it makes it harder to catch that bar from a certain position. You're going to have to control that weight. So what is the necessary amount of force required to move that bar from here to there efficiently and then get it back into position? Well, same thing applies to hand-to-hand combat, right? And different rules of engagement for law enforcement versus military personnel. We're serve and protect, not not search and destroy. So it's just it really is the matter of learning specifically what it is you need to program into your daily training to suit your needs. You're a professional, you know what you need, and you know what your toolkit requires. So how can you better integrate your toolkit specifically into your training and also get that metabolic and physically taxing aspect, muscularly taxing aspect to achieve whatever fitness goals you want to achieve? There's nothing wrong with wanting to look good, right?
100%.
Right? So, you want to look good. You want to train your muscles to be a certain way and look a certain way. that's all fine, because guess what? That fits perfectly into the grand scheme of things. If you're training consistently, that stuff's going to come anyway, right?
Right.
As long as you're fueling properly and consistently stimulating the tissues, they're going to get the breakdown necessary to be built up through nutrition and, rest and recovery. So why not also experience the benefits of getting better at your work and just becoming
100%.
just a more proficient human, right? Be
Right.
really good at humaning. That's
Yeah.
kind of the goal for me. I tell people all the time, you're going to pick something up off the ground. You're not going to do a full dynamic warm up before you do it, and square up on it, get your back nice and flat, squat down, right? You're probably, what you're going to do? You're going to step forward at that object. You're going to reach down, round your back to go get it. And you know what? You should be able to do that. Your body
100%.
should instantly explode the moment your back rounds. I mean, that's insane, right? So why not train that way though, right? Teach your body to work under those loads and through those full ranges of motion under loads, light and heavy, right? Fast and slow, controlled, hard contractions, and mixing up the variation of movement patterns. It doesn't always have to be slow out, slow in. It could be fast out, slow in, right? You can vary all of that up. You're just playing around with the variables at that point and different sensory inputs, right?
Right.
That's
Before I let you go, Dan, kind of tell us about where we can find you on social media and stuff like that. What other stuff you got coming on down the pipeline?
Yeah. So, I've got my website, livekinetically.com. I also have the kinetic training store. That's, where I'm starting to populate a lot of the products for drop shipping and all that kind of stuff. Working on a rapid tactical response program right now.
Awesome.
That's going to be launched soon. So a very generalized, requires no real added equipment as of right now, and then obviously Instagram. I've got my my YouTube as well. I'm doing podcasts. I plan to have you on my podcast
Awesome.
coming up soon, so I can pick your brain, because I want to know a lot more about the private security world and what that's like. And Instagram at livekinetically, and of course my website, livekinetically.com.
Awesome. Well, now again, thank you for this, and stay safe, and all the success with your training.
Thank you, sir. And you too. And let me know anytime you need any helpful tips on applying that Chopfit and simulated stress work.
No, I'm all about it. Actually, sometimes I want to swear in some people's heads, but I don't think that's part of the MO there. Well, thank you for this, Dan.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Thank you all for checking out this week's episode. Once again, I'm John. If you liked what you heard and saw today, subscribe to our YouTube channel, find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and check out our brand new merch store with hats, coffee mugs, t-shirts, other cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Again, thank you all for support. Be safe, and see you next week.